Welcome, all you real estate rock stars. From David and I, we just want you to know how much we appreciate the support for the podcast. There are so many statistics out there that show that most people never get to episode 20 of their podcast, and 95% of people don't make it. And we're zooming past episode 20, and we appreciate the journey, and we're only inspired to get more and better content to provide to you. And it all comes from your feedback, your support, your sharing of the podcast, your helping on social media. So I want to tell you how much love we feel, and we're just going to get better and bigger and stronger. Today, though, I know that if you've been living under a rock, you may not know this, but if you haven't, rates have been skyrocketing for the last, say, 18 months. A lot of people's traditional investing strategies just aren't working right now, right? They're feeling the heat, but there is a silver lining. In today's episode, we're going to dive into a powerful alternative that's based on lending your money as a hard money lender. So forget the never-ending calls from stressed tenants, the constant battle with that old leaky faucet. We're going to show you how to become a hard money lender today and unlock the world of benefits. So imagine earning steady returns by lending at a high 70% loan to value ratio. And we're going to tell you what that means in this episode if that sounds foreign to you. But that basically means that your principal is going to be super secure, and it's going to act as a built-in safety net. But it doesn't even stop there, everybody. We'll also unveil the secrets of meticulous underwriting by carefully vetting potential borrowers so that you'll ensure they're rock-solid bets to repay the loan that brings down and minimizes the risk, and it maximizes your peace of mind. So if you're ready to ditch the landlord life, or if you're stalled, you're sitting on the beach right now, you're not sure where to invest your money, let's turn that money into a cash flow machine, even in this crazy market that we're in right now. So buckle up, everybody. We're about to unlock the secrets of hard money lending. Let's do this, and thank you so much again for your support. All right, everybody. Welcome to another, I'd like to think of this as a special episode, David, to burn your boats. David, I see a cool little picture in the background, and it looks like some very nice terrain in the background of your window, David. So for people that are watching this on YouTube or Spotify can see this, but they may not be able to know where that is. So David, tell the listeners where you're sitting at today for this episode.
I'm in a little village in the south of France called Collateral. It's right on the French-Spanish border. And kind of more importantly, I'm here for the next 6 weeks. I've just spent a week over in Girona, on the Spanish side. We flew in with my wife and kids into Barcelona about a week and a half ago. We spent a beautiful week up in this historic, hilltop town type thing. And then we came up here to Collier, where we're going to have the kids in sailing camp. They're actually in sailing camp right now. And we're going to spend the summer here. And we are going to talk about, in this episode, how we're going to do this and how I'm doing this and what's supporting this. And what's supporting this is one of the magic pieces of real estate that gets overlooked. You don't really hear a lot of people talking about it, but it is this natural progression within real estate, Clark, right? So you know as well as I do, when people get into real estate, they really jump in at 2 points in their lives. When they're like in their 20s and they're trying to become flippers or realtors or something like that, and they're making money within real estate, that's when they start learning about real estate. Or when they're doing some high-paying W-2 activity or business and they make a lot of money, and then they start getting into real estate, right? But that's getting into either the making money side of it or the investing side of it. But there's a whole new world of real estate that not a lot of people know about, Clark. And that's what's funding my entire summer in France. And would you like to have a chat about that today?
I would love to. But first, before we jump into the nuts and bolts of how you're able to do that, you're sitting in France right now. I need some sort of France saying or something that you've heard over the last few days. We have this stereotypical thing. What's an impersonation you could do, David, for our listeners? It's like something that you picked up along the way. I'd love to hear it because you kind of
You
did
know
it
what?
before we did this episode, but I'd like to put
You're
you on the spot.
you're asking the wrong guy.
Uh,
My Spanish is okay, right? But in high school, I flunked French so bad. Like of all the subjects that I
yeah.
studied in school, French was just something I didn't connect with. I didn't connect with the language at all. And so when I'm out and about here every day, I am speaking more Spanish to the French than they are comfortable with, you know. But look, there's stereotypes out there about French people and French culture. And let's just say when you are in a line in a store, let's say, and you've got little American kids running around, those stereotypes ring true. I'm not going to say what they are, but I'm going to say that, you know, having spent a week in Spain where it's very family orientated and very kid friendly and people smile at children, I haven't witnessed the same level of friendliness to children. But outside of that, the place is beautiful, absolutely
Yeah.
stunningly gorgeous. And the prospect of spending the summer here is something that I really embrace, you know.
Well, I think that a lot of people listening are probably at a point in their career where they're starting to, as I like to allude to, the shot clock is starting to tick a little bit quicker on their W-2 job, or, maybe you own a company, but you're working like 60-hour weeks, and what you thought was going to be working off of a laptop from the beach is not quite what it actually is. And so it's like, how do we get to the point where you're going to be there for how long? 2 months, 2.5 months in
Yeah,
Europe?
about 2 months. Yeah.
So 2 months in Europe, like how many people listening to this right now can say to yourself, yeah, I'm going to go for 2 months and just go take the whole family, right? So you've got 3 kids and your beautiful wife, to be able to just go over there and, work at your leisure, still work, but at the same time enjoy, and the experiences that your kids are getting right now is, I mean, how nice would it be for you to have, if you have kids and they're able to experience going to France for a week and then going to Spain for a week? Like those are moments that you're never going to get back. And that's why we do this podcast. In my opinion, it's like, how do we get to a point where you can have the freedom that you're not just looking at 1 week at Disney and that's like the highlight of your year if you're lucky, right? So let's get into it, David. I think that that's a good segue. So today, David, we're going to talk about how in the hell do you make any kind of money today in real estate? Because as you and I both know, it's risky. The prices are still high. Sellers have super high expectations like it's 2021. And I'll give you a quick example too of this is that, I've always had a philosophy of like, you know what, I'm just going to work harder. I'm going to work harder than the next guy. I'm going to make more offers. I'm going to dial the telephone more. And, it probably from summer of 23 to the end of 23, I was bent and determined I'm going to find a 15 unit. I'm going to find a 20 unit. And so I was calling on LoopNet, on Crexy, making dials to these brokers saying, hey, listen, here's my offer. The broker laughs at me. We all have it's like comedy hour because I'm actually offering something that brings some cash flow in or just breaks even, right? And theirs is horribly, red ink all over the page. And I said, okay, remember me when they drop their price. And then I went through and I put about 30 LOIs, and LOI is a letter of intent. Okay. And that means that I intend to offer you, X for your 20 unit apartment complex. And I did that and I said, I'm just going to work harder. I'm going to find that needle in the haystack. Fast forward 6 months later, I started looking back at all the properties I made offers on. And like out of the 30 I sent, like 27 were still sitting on the market. Right. And, and I think me and you had this kind of discussion of like, I'm just banging a square peg into a round hole. Like I'm spending this time, this energy on something that's just, yeah, maybe if I work 80 hours a week, I can find something, but is that the best use of my time? Is there other things out there that I can bring in income now, today, that's less risky, that requires less brain damage? So for you hearing this, you might be facing similar challenges right now where it's like flips are risky. Buying apartment buildings or commercial is like comically funny to look at these and be like, I'm gonna lose $4,000 a month on this 12 unit. How do you expect me to buy this unless I just have $2 million sitting under the mattress. So that's been my experience. Maybe you've seen something similar just on residential. So David, what is it that listeners can do? Pivot, maybe look at something to get their ass off the beach. They're sitting on the beach, they're listening, they're like, well, I'm going to wait for the next deal. What can they do while they're waiting? Talk to the listener about what another idea is.
Well, you've said a lot there, Clark. And, the thing that jumped out at me right away, you said you can work harder. You can work harder, right? You can put more hours in.
Right.
Um, you know, for everybody out there, understand that there's you go out to work every day, but you can send other resources out to work every day as well, like capital. You can send money out, and money will work harder than you will, right? Money can actually make more money than you can, right?
Yeah.
But you have to have money first, right? So that's not applicable. What I've just said is not applicable to a 22-year-old who's got no money, right? That 22-year-old, I'm sorry, all the 22-year-olds out there, but
we've all been there.
If you need to go out and make money, you're going to have to put your time and your sweat and your effort and your intelligence and create a money-making machine, right? And that could be, go to work, do any of these kind of things, right? And then there is the second stage where you can take what money you have made and you can make investments, right? That will make you wealthy over the long term. But right now, there's no cash flow in real estate. We all know it. It's what you were just alluding to. And so nobody wants to buy, right? Because everything that we underwrite right now is overpriced. Interest rates are crazy, crazy town, right? Rents are stable, but insurance has gone up, taxes have gone up, costs have gone up, everything else has gone up, right? And so cash flow is really under pressure at the moment, okay? And so most investors, certainly that I talk to, that are experienced and that are at my stage in life, I'm 52. So if you're 22, 23, 24 right now, you've got no choice. You're just out there, you can put like 80 hours in a week and you will carve out results.
Yeah.
You will carve out a flip. You will carve out a wholesale deal, or you will carve out a good salary from working, right? So absolutely. If you are buy and hold, right? If you're still thinking super long term, if you're in your 30s and 40s, don't stop buying and holding. But you're not going to get any cash flow today. But there's a whole area of real estate that not a lot of people truly understand. And that is, and I'm going to explain it to you in the way that I understood it, right? So when I was flipping homes, all my own money, I would take my money and I would go out and I'd buy a house with it. And the moment I bought the house, right, I described it at the time as my plane is in the air, right? So I take $30,000 and I get a loan for $70,000. Let's just make the round numbers. I get a loan for 70,000 and I take it off. And at that point in time, the plane is in the air. But when I finish my renovation and I land the plane, essentially, I finish the renovation, I sell it, I do the home inspection, appraisals, and the money hits my account again, right? The plane is now landed, the full cycle, right? So most of the time, if you're in any kind of business, not even fix and flip business, but any business whatsoever, your planes are in the sky, right? That's where your money is. You're reinvesting in your business, you're reinvesting in this, you're reinvesting in that. So what happens when the environment in which you're operating becomes less conducive, right? And in our case, interest rates went up. Investors really didn't want to buy in scale the type of properties that we were fixing and flipping. And so we landed all of our planes. And what happens when we land our planes? All of our cash flow, all of our capital lands with it. And we're not taking it off again. So there's a huge amount of people out there right now, quote unquote, sitting on the sidelines, not just in the fix and flip world, but in many different aspects of life and business that are sitting on the sidelines right now on large amounts of capital. on large amounts of cash. Now, this is where the magic of this podcast is going to come through. For most people, they understand real estate is you can make money in real estate, fixing, flipping, wholesaling, realtoring. For a lot of other people, they understand that you can make money by being an investor. You buy the real estate, you put a tenant in there, you hold it for 15 years or all that kind of jobs, and that can make you wealthy. But there is a whole different world of real estate, and that's in the lending aspect of it. Have you ever heard of buy real estate with no money down, or use OPM, other people's money? Well, this conversation today is about who OPM are. Who are those other people's money? What do those other people think? What are they doing? And what's the whole, let's say, hard money lending business about? Because if you are 55 or older, or if you're sitting on the sidelines and you have capital just sitting on the sidelines and it's driving you nuts, you can buy a T-bill, 5%. You can put it in the stock market. There's a lot of people think the stock market's pretty highly valued at the moment. Some people do, some people don't. That's fine, right? But there's still a huge amount of cash sitting on the sidelines in our industry, especially in our industry. Folks like you, folks like me, we know when there's a good time to do deals, and we know when there's a bad time to do deals. And right now, it's not a great time to do a short-term deal per se. But that's not to say that there's not good short-term deals out there. I'm just a little bit older, and I just don't want to do the work. And so if you were a little bit older, you don't want to do the work, but you want outsized returns. So let's give you a quick example. Let's say, imagine...
David, let me just jump in really quick to elaborate on that one point. Is if you're a little bit older, maybe it's not a good idea to do short-term stuff. I talk to people a lot that are 30, 35, and they're like, you know what? I think I'm going to do a flip. And I'm just in this environment. It's like I have to jump out of my body and say, please don't do that. Like, please don't. The risk that you have when you have, there's a reason why experienced flippers are sitting on the sidelines, is because it's not because they don't know enough to do these flips. It's because the market is too risky and they know how to evaluate things. So if you're sitting here listening, you're like, you know what, I'm thinking about doing my first flip and I have a W-2 job and I'm going to do it as a side hustle thing. Like, I can't tell you how risky that is from so many points of view. You got the market, you got the fact that you're just not very experienced. So I could argue that the 28-year-old that wants to just do a side hustle, fix and flip right now, or the 58-year-old that maybe just doesn't have the energy, they don't want to get into that, they don't want to create a business, is that you may have different points of pain, but either way, in my opinion right now, it's just too risky.
Well, you know what? It is and it isn't. I definitely agree with you, but most of the people I know in the lending business, in the hard money lending business, they're just retirees, and they don't want to do a flip. Right. They're not interested in, working. They don't want to buy any more real estate because they might have 10 or 20 or 30 homes already, or whatever it is that they might have. So they're not really interested in that. But what they want most of all is they want a check in their bank account on the first of the month, where they don't do a tap to get it, right? All they do is agree to lend money. And then every month on the first of the month, they get, $1,000, $2,000, $10,000, $20,000 for doing nothing. And we're going to talk about that right now. What would you do if I could give you $20,000 every single month and go to France for the summer? What would you do? And what does that look like? So that's what this is about. Right now, you can go out and let's just make it round numbers. You could put $100,000 down on a $500,000 deal right now and make no cash flow.
You'll lose money, more than likely.
You might even lose money, right?
Depending on the market.
$500,000 house, put $100,000 down and break even in a good scenario. Now, There's other benefits to real estate, but let's just keep it plain and simple. Or you could take $100,000 and you could lend it to somebody who has a better business model than you, and they will give you, I'm just going to choose a round number for this, 12%. So I'm going to go out there and lend somebody who's got, and we're going to go into who that somebody is, who they are and what they're about and why they would borrow the money in the first place. But I can go out and take that $100,000 and I can lend it to somebody, and they will give me $1,000 a month on the first of the month in my bank account. And I don't make a phone call. I have no tenants. I have no toilets. It just comes in consistently. And I am completely and utterly protected by the collateral on the deal under which I loaned. My best case scenario is that they don't pay me, right? Then I go in and I swoop in and I get a hugely discounted asset. So why don't we talk about what hard money lending is, or what private capital is in this case, Clark? And I'm going to start off by asking you a question. You, the listener, even. Would you pay 12%, right, on a loan, an interest rate of 12%, and 4% or 5% or 6% origination to borrow my money for 12 to 18 months? Would you pay 12% in interest and 6% in just a one-off fee to borrow money off me for 12 to 16 months?
David, I'm Googling psych ward so that I can get them to come pick you up in France and take you away, because you're being absolutely ridiculous right now.
So you cannot imagine a scenario, we're being facetious, obviously,
right?
But you cannot imagine a scenario where you, the listener, would go out and borrow money at 12 or 12% with 6% origination. And the reason why you can't imagine that is because you do not have the right business model in your mind where that is an irrelevant amount. That's just a cost of doing business. It's a line item in a piece of business. So of course you wouldn't. That's the answer, Clark, right? Most people out there, when I say, I lend money at 12% and 4% origination, they're like, who would possibly borrow at those rates? Well, that's what private lending is, right?
David, tell the listeners what origination means. That's a very, localized term for lending. So explain if people don't know what origination means.
Okay, let's just agree that it's 4%. Let's say I give you $100,000 loan at a 4% origination. The origination is my fee for giving it to you, right? So you're going to pay me interest on the full 100%,
right?
On the full 100,000. But on day one, I'm taking 4,000 of that, is 4% on 100,000, and I'm putting it in my back pocket.
Yeah.
And so the reason why I laid the question out, like, would you borrow money at that rate? It's because somebody asked me that question about, I'm going to say 20 years ago. I'm like, what do you do? It's like, I'm a hard money lender. And he told me, I'm like, what do you, how do you make money? He said, I lend out at 12% and 4%. I'm like, nearly fell off my seat. I'm like, who the hell would borrow money that's that expensive for such a short period of time? He goes, people who have the right business model. He said, you just don't have the right business model right yet. And it's only as I got into real estate that I understood what that right business model was. So let's talk about private lending. Now, so it's also known, just in case anyone is out there is wondering, it's also called private lending or asset-backed lending or non-conventional lending or non-agency lending. But to make it simple, it's just like this. Imagine I own a house for $400,000 and I do not have a loan on it. Okay? And I went to you and I said, hey, Clark, I have this house. The house is collateral. The house is your security. I want you to give me $200,000 and I'll give you as security the rights to take my $400,000 asset away if I don't pay you. Does that sound like a good deal to you?
Love it. Sounds great.
It sounds great, right? So I'm going to give you, that's what's called a 50%, loan to value in a first position loan. Okay. So in that scenario, I'm going to give you 200,000. You're going to give me a lien on a $400,000 asset. no matter how hard you screw, you can go out and buy a boat with that $200,000. I want you to not pay me the 200, so I get the $400,000 asset. Does that make any sense to you?
Yeah.
All righty. So, Clark, who are the borrowers, right? Who are the people who borrow at these kind of rates, and why would they do it? So let's just go through the people who do the borrowing, right? What is the right business model? Let's talk about who are the borrowers.
So the first thing that comes to mind in real estate is just, your fix and flipper, right? Is that they've got some junky house. You can't get the right insurance on it. Bank of America wouldn't touch that, or Wells Fargo wouldn't touch that loan with a 10-foot pole on that asset because it's falling down. It's got a leaky roof. It wouldn't pass inspection, right? So the fix and flipper has to go out, and 95% of fix and flippers are not funding with their own cash. Even if you see those signs on this road that's like, I pay cash for houses or whatever, they don't mean I pay cash. They mean I buy your house with OPM, as you mentioned earlier. So other people's money, and that other people's money is the hard money that we're talking about in this episode. So that is going to be a low-hanging fruit of people. However, it's something that's one segment, but I want to give you a personal example of one where we took hard money on. And it's a slightly different scenario. So we bought a property and we fixed it up, okay? And then we put it on the market and it wasn't selling for what we wanted to sell it for. So we said, okay, and you may have heard some of our strategy right now is we like to build additional units in the back so we can get more income. And the price that we spend for the additional unit versus the rent we get is a great ratio for us. So it's like one of our cheat codes to be able to actually get some cash flow in this non-cash flowing market. So let's just say that we were all in on the front house for $275,000, and then we get $2,300 a month of rent for that. And then we build another unit in the back for, let's say, $150,000, and let's say we get $2,000 a month for that, right? So it almost equals out to like the 1% rule. And this is in a good market, okay? Now, as most of you listening know, it's very difficult to go out and buy let's say a $200,000 house with the 1% rule, meaning I would get $2,000 a month rent. Okay. So fast forward, we finish the house, David, we get it renovated, and we're like, all right, we're ready to go get a nice, clean, stabilized loan. But the back unit is not built yet. Okay. So the appraiser comes out and they're there to appraise how much the front house is worth. And then the projected value of that back house that's now it's just dirt. There's nothing there. And they're just like, okay, well, let me go find other comparables, but they can't see it. They can't touch it. They can't feel it. Well, guess what? Lo and behold, they come back with a value that's much lower than we think it's going to be. And I think part of the reason is that, appraisers are just human beings, right? They have emotions and they can get swayed one way or the other. An appraisal is, in my opinion, very, very subjective. So they gave us a very low appraisal that we didn't like. So what do? We had to go out and get hard money, right, to be able to justify building the structure, being able to see this beautiful, nice new property that then we rent out. So we have to take it all the way to fruition. Then we'll go back to the more traditional lenders where the appraiser can see it. He can see the lease that we have in place, right? So it's like, why would someone like us take hard money at these really high interest rates? Well, because the appraisal was so low that we'd have to leave so much money in the deal. And we're like, that's ridiculous. We're not going to do that. We're just going to take some short-term money. We know we're going to overpay for that debt, but ultimately we're going to be able to get a much higher appraisal when that additional unit is built. It's leased up. It looks good. It's clean. It's brand new. It smells, you got that new car smell. And then we're able to go back to the lender and present this fully finished product, on a nice silver platter. And then we can pay the money back. So that is just a personal example of why we use hard money, because it's like when someone walks into an old dirty house and they have the vision to see where the nice new kitchen is and the new bathroom and the nice paint on the wall. And some people will walk in there and they'll just turn around and be like, this smells like dog, I'm walking out. Yet there's $100,000 of profit on the table that they can't see. Well, appraisers are no different. They can't forecast everything as well. So that I feel like is a really good example of why we personally would use money, and we are using hard money for that case. So David, what else is out there?
Just to summarize what you've just said, the conventional lenders won't lend you money on a house that needs a lot of work.
Yeah.
Let's just say that, right? So if you go to Bank of America or Wells Fargo, I say I want a loan, and they're like, cool, and but I want a loan on this heap of dog crap over
Right.
here without a
Yeah.
roof, and they're like, no, 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 we're not lending on that one. We'll lend you on the nice one. Like,
Right.
okay, that's where hard money lenders come in. They do give you the loan on the piece of dog house, and then from the very first day, you put a new roof on it, you put a new floors, doors, baseboards, air conditioning, put new electrical, put new plumbing, and every day the value of that home is rising, right? So me as the lender, for every day that my loan is out, my loan gets less risky because the
Yep.
value is going up every single day. So some examples of people who borrow money at those kind of rates. And in that scenario, the flipper might make 60, 70, $80,000, and the money has cost him $7 or $8 or $9,000. But that's just a line item. So he's still going to make 60,000. And in that transaction makes, I'm just going to choose up a number, $8,000. The lender makes $8,000. So who else borrows money at these rates? Developers, right? So I buy a land plot and I need $400,000 to build a house on it. And the land plot costs me $300,000. It's got no loan on it. So it's fully collateralized. And so the borrower, the developer comes to me and say, hey, David, I've got this lot. I just paid $300,000 for it. I need construction loan to build on it. I'm like, all right, I'll consider that, right? So from day one, I give the money to the developer to pour the concrete. I get $300,000 lien on the lot. So if he pours the concrete, doesn't pay me, I get a lot for how much it cost me to pour the concrete, $4,000. I get a $300,000 lot for $4,000. So I want them again to fail. I don't really want them to fail because that's not what the business is, but you get my point, right? The real estate investors, developers, anybody doing any kind of bridge activity, right? But there's loads and loads of other borrowers out there. Let's imagine you're a dentist and you find a nice little commercial unit on your drive home, and you've got one office already. Let's say you say, you know what? I'm going to go and I'm going to buy that building, and I'm going to fix it up, and I'm going to have another surgery in there, right? That's my second business. Well, he might go to a conventional lender, an ordinary bank, and they're like, nah, you've only got one business, and you're only in business 2 or 3 years. Really, just you come back to us when you're more experienced, right? Well, in that scenario, that dentist could come to me and say, hey, David, look, I've got a $700,000 house that I own. I only owe $200,000 on it. I have a $500,000 of equity on my house, right? And I'll pledge that collateral. So, for a $200,000 loan. I'm like, cool. So he owes 200. I'm going to lend him 200, and let's just worth 700. So he still has, $200,000 or $300,000 worth of equity left, right? So that's your dentist or your doctor or any professional who needs money to do a business thing, but they have to have collateral to pledge in the first place, right? So talk about people who are going through divorce, right? They want to get the spouse out of their equation, and they own $1 million house. They're splitting it 50-50. And let's say in that scenario, they don't owe anything on it, and one of the people want to stay, and they say, look, you know what? I just want $500,000, and I want to pay off my spouse, so he or she can go on their way. So anybody who has collateral, who's going through something in their life, they can pledge the collateral so that in 6 months or 8 months, they can pay it back, or they can refinance their debt and bring it back in, right? So that's who the borrowers are, right? And so borrowers are typically seek hard money loans. As I say, real estate investors, property flippers. Look, these loans are attractive because they're quick, they're easy to get. You get funded in a few days, and there's none of the usual traditional banking brain damage that they're going to cause you.
I'll tell you one quick example of the divorcees. A lot of times people don't they're like, oh, divorcees, they're distressed. And I can give you a personal example of when I went through my first divorce, which is the only one I've had. Hopefully no more. And I was able to. Me and my ex-wife had real estate together, and we negotiated kind of like a buyout. And luckily she was reasonable enough to take payments. So I said, look, we kind of came up to a number that I had to pay her over a period of time. But if she would have said, you know what, I'm not going to take payments, you're going to pay it to me all at once, or the deal's off the table. Right. Well, I didn't have that money just like sitting around to pay her, because a lot of that was in the real estate that I was taking over. So if we had 50-50 ownership in a rental house, right, now I have 100% ownership, but that money is still stuck in the rental property. Right. So I can't just go and cut off a piece of the house and sell that to have that money to pay her. So if I would have had to have taken that money out, I would have had to either sold the rental property, which, as you've heard from many episodes, it's time in the market, not timing the market. So I don't want to sell my rental properties if I don't have to, because I understand all the benefits of appreciation and debt pay down and tax benefits and all of that. So it's like, what do you do, right? And my only option would have been is to go to a kind of like a private money lender and borrow the total amount of money. And then that would have given me time to be like, okay, maybe I do need to sell a rental property. What's the one I like the least? That's what every single landlord does that has a bunch of rental properties, is the one they're going to put out for sale is their shittiest rental property that they can't keep good tenants. The roof's about to go bad, or if it already is bad. So at least it would have given me time to say, okay, I want to keep this deal together that we've structured. Okay. But I want you keep that fish on the hook. I don't want to lose that hook, but I don't want to like be forced to sell off one rental property and it might not have been the right one. I need time to digest it, look at the numbers, see all the different things, right? And so luckily I wasn't in that position, and we had a very amicable split that I'm thankful for. But not every divorce is like that. And there's a lot of resentful spouses, and they're like, not only are you going to pay me right now, but I don't want to give you any financing, and you better pay it to me right now. Ding, ding, ding. That is a primary borrower for a hard money company to come in, save the day, and now the emotions are off the table. Yes, it's high interest rate, but at least you now have time to like move the chips around on the board. So I just wanted to put that in as like a personal example, because a lot of times on podcasts it's just high level. If this were to happen, if that were to happen, that's something that hits close to me. And I'm thankful that I didn't have to borrow the loan, but I would have in a New York minute if I didn't. So David, you had talked about, we've talked about the borrowers right now. Who are the lenders? So basically, I think that the easiest thing to kind of jump into is someone that's getting close to retirement age. Maybe they're 55, 60, 65 years old, and they want mailbox money. And I know that a lot of times we talk about like rental properties as like mailbox money, until you buy your first rental property and you realize that, yeah, it's not a full-time job, but it sure as hell isn't just like show up at the mailbox every month, collect your perfectly rented, rent income with no calls, faucets don't break, all that kind of thing. So there's certainly, it is a business. It's not mailbox money. This that we're talking about right here is really truly mailbox money. You're not fixing toilets. You're not hassling tenants to make payments. You're not having to pay property taxes or worry about the insurance when they call you and say, hey, the roof is old, replace it, or we're canceling you. None of that stuff exists in this world. So I would say that the lenders that are retiring and they're not as concerned maybe about appreciation because they're getting 65, 70 years old, and like, I just need money that I can count on every single month to walk out to that mailbox. I can get that money and not worry about it for the next 30 days until it comes, and you can count on it, right? It's sustainable. It's something that is very predictable, that you can see, and that you've got a sophisticated borrower on the other end that's running a business, right? A lot of times, especially if they're a fix and flip, all the people you just discussed about, the dentist, right? The dentist isn't going to default on a $2,000 payment, more than likely, because I mean they're sophisticated, right? And they've worked very hard to get to where they're at. And the last thing they want to do is roll it backwards because they can't make a $2,000 a month payment. They're going to make that happen. So I think, David, the top of the list in terms of who's most likely is if you're sitting here and you're like, all right, I'm still working my W-2 job. I'm 58 years old and I just need some just stress-free passive income. I think that's got to be the top of the list.
Okay. So I agree. That's wonderfully summarized. To make it even more simple, imagine for every $100,000 that you have in your bank account, you could lend that out and get $1,000 a month on the first of the month. That's just a very simplistic view of it, but it's fairly accurate. And so if you have $200,000 sitting around, you can get $2,000 a month. If you've $500,000 sitting around, get $5,000 a month. If you have $1 million sitting around in your life and it's just sitting cash, right, or it's sitting in other lazy formats, you get $10,000 a month. $10,000 a month every month, just bang in your. If you have $2 million sitting around that's being lazy, right, or it's in other assets that are doing nothing, you can get $20,000 a month. And so the people I know, the people who I'm familiar with and people who I lend to and work with, some of these people are making $60, $70, $80, $90,000 a month doing nothing whatsoever. Okay. And that's the people who understand how lending works. Okay. So remember, you have the active, you got the active income. That's the guy going out, looking for the deals and, swinging hammers and all that. Then you've got the long-term, capital appreciation, buy and hold folks. But then you have the people who, and the best way we can describe it are retirees, don't want any of that stress. Now, there's a good question here. You have a mortgage on your house, Clark. I have a mortgage on lots of houses. How many times have my lenders ever had to fix any of my toilets? Has your mortgage company ever come in and fix your toilet?
They keep I called Wells Fargo multiple times and they keep hanging up on me.
Right. How many times when you got a leak in your roof, how many times has your mortgage company come out and fix that?
I'm going to go 0.
Okay, so let's go with a different question. How many times have you not paid your mortgage every month?
I am 10 for 10.
So you've never not paid a mortgage?
Correct.
Okay. The lender in that scenario is Wells Fargo or Bank of America. The lender in the scenario that we're talking about is exactly the same. So exactly the same position. I lend money to people who have business models that can absorb those kind of rates, right? I have high levels of collateral in the form of real estate if they default and they don't pay me. I have intermediaries, servicing companies, or, debt funds, or a hard money lender operation that is that's finding the borrower, that's taking my money and connecting the borrower with my money, the lender, put that together. And that person in the middle has the sophistication of being able to analyze, okay, the borrower wants to do this. Is this a good borrower? Do they have the experience? Do they have the capital? Do they have the down payment? Is the business model that they're doing, let's say it's a fix and flip, is that a good deal? Are they buying a good deal? Are their numbers right? Is their ARV, their after renovation value right? Is the amount of money they're telling me, oh, we're going to need $40,000 to fix that up? I'm like, no, you're going to need 65. So somebody like me who's done, let's say, 750 to 800 flips in my life, I'm able to analyze another flipper's deal, right? So if somebody brings me a deal and says, David, will you lend on this deal? I have enough experience to be able to look at their deal and say, hey, you've got a killer deal here. Or, hey, buddy, if I were in your shoes, you need to go and hit the pipe somewhere because this is the worst deal I've ever seen in my life. And so that's what the people in the middle do. They connect the borrowers, right, which are the flippers or the builders or the developers, with the lenders. And the lenders are usually, for want of a better reason, they're people who have a lot of capital and they want a very high return. They want that return to be monthly. They don't really care so much about appreciation, and they want income. It's an income play, right? So real estate does lots of things, but one of the things it can do is be a very, very clear provider of income, but you need the capital. That's why I said very few 23-year-olds are walking around with $2 or $3 million or $500,000 spare cash in their world. But if you do have $500,000 or $200,000 or $700,000 in spare cash and you don't know what to do with it, let's just choose a number, 500,000. Know that every month that's sitting in your bank account, you're not getting $5,000 from being a lender, because that $500,000 can work harder than most Americans. That's the scary thing about money. It can work harder than humans.
I want to give an example, and I think it's something that we've tended to evolve to over the last probably 12 to 18 months is like, I know that I like the analogy of like digging for gold, right? So it's like when you're out there and you're putting your name in terms of, I'm going to borrow that money and I have to pay it back, right? Within X amount of time, and I have to pay interest on it. You're digging for gold, right? And you also have the highest risk, but you also have the highest return available, right? Like the lender is not going to make $80,000 of interest on a $300,000 deal. The flipper can't, but the flipper can also lose that money just as easily, right? So they're out there digging for gold, right? During, the beginning parts of COVID, everyone was digging for gold. Everyone was a freaking genius. And, it was just, they were making this $70,000 spread, whatever it was. Lenders are happy. Borrowers are happy. Title companies are happy. Everyone's happy. Realtors are happy. And I think as the market has shifted, right, you can start to see all the players start to get nervous, right? Like realtors, God knows you can't throw a dead cat without hitting a story about how realtors are, they're taking out buyer commissions, and there's, only the strong will survive. Well, it's a lot like that too. And it's like, we're seeing the shift to selling the shovel, right? So you're on the side of the road, you're just selling the shovel. Whether or not the person finds gold or not is not your problem, and you're getting paid for your shovel that you sell. And that's essentially what this is, that there's just so much less risk. And I think in this environment, it's nice to be able to take less risk. Yeah, you're not going to get the potential reward, but you're also not going to get slapped in the face so hard. And that's what we've been trying to avoid. Is that sometimes there's times to play offense and there's times to play defense. And I think in this climate right now, playing defense is a very smart maneuver. I think that if this is 2021, everyone that was playing offense, you are winning. It didn't matter how good or bad you underwrote the deal. But now is the time to play defense. This that we're talking about today on this episode is, in my opinion, the best defensive metric to be able to de-risk what you're putting your dollars into, to be able to get that nice, safe return. And you're not having to worry about taxes going up or the market swinging, because I don't know where the market's going to be tomorrow, right? We don't know. We've got an election coming up in a few months. Who knows where that's going to take things? But I do know that as long as the deal is properly underwritten, David, to your point, which I love, and this is something that's interesting, is that most lenders have not flipped 700 houses, okay? So for you, and I have a lot less experience, but I've flipped a lot of houses as well too, to be able to look at someone bringing us a deal and saying, I need, X amount of money on this. We just run it through the same process like I was buying the deal myself, right? And so it's like, well, if I wouldn't buy this deal, I'm sure as hell not going to lend you money on that deal, so that the chances that the market goes up or you can renovate it for cheaper than we could, that's too risky. So the exciting thing about that is that because we can see it through both sides of the fence, and we're not just taking the appraiser's word for it. So if you look at a lot of times when you have a money lender, they're going to get an appraisal and they're just going to go off the appraiser's word, right? But you and I both know, listening, that there are very nuanced neighborhoods, right? You have certain blocks that are better than others. There's streets, right? An appraiser is just going to pull 3 or 4 comps that are within X period, and that's kind of what they're going to go off of. But the beautiful thing is being able to look at the deal through the lender's eyes, but being able to stand in that person's shoes and say, okay, if I was in their shoes, would I do this deal? If the answer is hell yes, then how quickly can we, put the funds in that person's pocket to have them succeed, and everyone else succeeds as a result. But at the same time, I've seen deals where borrowers, it fell apart at the closing table because the lender said, this came back not the way we thought it was, and they ended up losing the deal. They were pissed on day one, and they should have been buying the lender steak dinners on day 2, because they're like, holy shit, I thank God I didn't buy that house and I didn't lose 6 months of my life and stress and all that. So there's so much more that goes on behind the curtain, and being able to have the experience that's on this call right now to look at a deal and size it up very quickly. It's going to be beneficial to all parties involved. Even if you deliver the bad news to the borrower, like, hey, you're not going to have your cake and eat it too. And then, that's just, it's invaluable experience.
It is, it's a second layer of due diligence for in this case, you were talking about a flipper trying to borrow money for a deal. And that flipper can bring that deal to me, and I'm going to look at that deal. And if I think it's a bit of a tight deal, I'm going to bring that to their attention and say, hey, listen, I'm not going to lend on this one, or I will lend on it, but you need to go back and negotiate $45,000 discount off your purchase price because you're paying too much for it. And look, there's a reason why we're having this conversation at this time. Okay. Almost every super experienced real estate professional I know, certainly in the fix and flip world, is moving towards, because they're at the kind of back end of their careers. They have a deep well of experience. And quite frankly, there's a huge amount of work in finding a deal, renovating a deal, and selling a deal. It's a full-time job, and it's a really stressful full-time job. As we age, we get more sophisticated as humans. We understand, and we have more resources. So this is just a natural progression, Clark. In people in their 20s and 30s, they'll start off in our business, fix and flipping, and hopefully move on to being developers and building some new homes and stuff like that. And then they get to the point where they don't want to fix and flip anymore. Then they went to new home construction and they did all that. And then they don't want to do that anymore. And they get to a point where they let the young people do all this stuff. Let the younger folks do the fix and flip. Let the younger folks find a deal. Let the younger folks, build that, subdivision. I'm just going to be the lender, right? And there's a role for that senior level of experience in the process. And that role is being filled right now. Almost everyone I know who's been fix or flipping for 10 or 15 years is moving into the lending space. Why? Because it's easier. It's just easier. And they have the money, and they have the reputation to raise the money from other people who want to take advantage of lending. And they have that reputation because they are able to analyze deals. They're deeply rooted inside. Let's say within Tampa, we're in Tampa. You are one of the best networkers I know out there. You know every single fix and flip, everyone doing the business. I know how to underwrite deals all day long. And I know a lot of people who have capital or who want to sit on the sidelines and have mailbox money. So it's just a natural progression. This isn't some hocus pocus, right? So we're talking about who are the lenders. The lenders are flippers who just don't want to do it anymore. The lenders are developers who've made a lot of money and they just don't want to do it anymore. The lenders are business owners who've just sold their business for $5 million. They put $2 million in the stock market. They put, $1 million into buying a quadplex, and they've got $2 million left, and they just want to make income. So that's what lending is. Lending is just part of a overall strategy that creates income for you, right? So look, if you're out there and you cannot find, you're like, I have lots of net worth, I have lots of equity in this, that, or the other, but I've lost my job and I've no income. You might really want to consider looking at being a hard money lender, because you can turn on an income stream tomorrow by becoming a lender. But you have to have capital to do it. So if you're eating away at your savings, and your savings are sitting in your bank account, that's crazy. Get your savings and put them out to work, and then spend the money
that you make
that comes in every month. But your savings remain protected by real estate, right? So look, there's one other lender out there. So there's another lender type. So anybody out there who has capital, doesn't want to do the work anymore, or doesn't like the marketplace at the moment. Let's say it's a particularly high risk marketplace right now. People are just like, nah, I don't want to be doing the buying and the adding value. I just want to be the lender, right? In 2008, we're going to talk about this in a moment. The level of default against the lender in 2008, 9, and 10 was less than 1%. People don't default on hard money lenders. I'm going to talk about that in the next section. So, but there is one other type of lender. let's say I own a quadplex and I owe nothing on it. Let's just say, right? It's worth $1 million. It's 4 units. And you know what? I'm just sick and tired of the tenants. And I'm sick and tired of fixing crap around the building. And let's say the building throws off $6,000 a month of cash flow because I've got no debt on it, right? And then some 27-year-old comes through and say, hey, listen, I want to buy your building, but I've got no money. Will you offer owner finance? I'm like, hell yeah, I'll offer owner finance. You take the building away, right? I'll sign the deed over to you. You give me, let's say, said it was $1 million, right? So let's say you give me $200,000. I'll become the lender for $800,000 and you give me $6,000 a month, right? To carry that. And then in 5 years' time, pay me back. That's another form of becoming the lender. Okay. So now instead of me responding to tenants and toilets and all that jazz in the middle of the night, I've just got $200,000. So I'll go off and do my boat thing or whatever it is I want to do. I've just created a loan for $800,000 and I've sold my home without using commission or without selling it. And then I have $6,000 a month coming in and the tenants aren't calling me anymore. I'm the lender now. I'm Wells Fargo. So that's another way to understand how to become a lender.
You know, there's always two sides to the coin, right? And we've just spent the last, 45 minutes talking about a way to actually put real dollars in your pocket every month without taking an extreme amount of risk, as we've alluded to. And just buying real estate, especially if you're buying it for the short term where you need to flip it and sell it, right? So we've talked about maybe as a lender, and we talked about who the lender is, who it could be. All right, so now you've put your money out there, right? But it's still an investment, David. It's still, it's not rainbows and sunshine every single day, right? There's still a risk that you have. And we want to make sure that we paint a very clear picture as to, yes, we talked about the benefits, the appeal to it, to a borrower, why a borrower would do it, why a lender would do it, but also too, what are the risks that a borrower may take and a lender may take? So David, why don't you start us off and talk to us a little bit about, okay, you have a borrower, they're going to come, they're going to take out money for the reasons that we discussed. What type of risks are they looking at that you need to understand when you're actually taking on this money?
Okay. So the borrower is bringing collateral to the table. Okay. In every scenario, the borrower is bringing something to the table of value.
David, I want people to understand what that means. So when you say they're bringing collateral to the table, that means it's not like a credit card, right? It's not like an American Express where American Express says, hey, here's $10,000 on an Amex, promise you'll pay it back, right? I just want people to understand that it has to be collateralized on an asset that has a percentage more than what you're borrowing. So this is not unsecured. This is not a credit card. This is not a unsecured line of credit from a bank. So I just want to put that.
So let's just put in some numbers on it. Let's say a house is worth $200,000. Okay. And you want a $120,000 loan. Okay. I'm going to look at is the house worth $200,000 and in its current condition? And I'm going to look at you, and then I'm going to look at the size of the loan. So let's say I say, okay, cool. So the house is worth $200,000 today, but you're going to put a new roof on and all that kind of stuff. And when you're finished doing what you're doing, the house is going to be worth $250,000. So the house, when you're in 6 months' time, or 3 months' time, the house is going to be worth $250,000. But I have only a $120,000 loan on it. So the risk to the borrower is that they don't pay me because they have to fix it up, they have to sell it. So here are the risks to the borrower, the person who's borrowing the money. They could lose because they would have come in with a big down payment. Okay, so they could lose their collateral, they could lose the underlying asset. The risks are short-term money loans are just that, they're short-term. They're usually 12 months to, let's say, 18 months. In certain cases, they can be 24-month loans, but they're never more than that. Okay, so the risk is that the borrower doesn't execute their plan in a year or in some cases 2 years, depending on what the loan term is, okay? So the risk right there is that the borrower runs out of time, and their 12% interest rate goes up to 15% or 18% interest rate, depending on what the usury laws are in a given state. And so the borrowers are always, on the hook for time. I think that's probably, the biggest thing, right? So they're not going to Wells Fargo. They have a lower loan to value ratio. So if Wells Fargo will lend you 90% or 95% on a house that you're going to move into and live, if you want to come in and do a fix and flip, I'm going to offer you maybe 65%. Does that make sense? Because I need a greater spread because there's more risk. So I'm not going to lend you as much money. So I'm going to lend you 65% of the current value of that home, not the value when you fix it up. Okay. So the borrower in that scenario almost always has to bring more collateral and more money to the table. Okay. And then the borrower in the fix and flip world, for example, has the potential market change, right? So let's say in a fix and flip world, and the borrower looks like they're going to buy the house for 200, they're going to spend $50,000 on it. It's going to be worth 330, so they plan on making $80,000, and then the market comes and savages them, right? And they don't make their 80, and then they kind of start burning through the equity that they had in the home as well. So the borrower could lose $100,000. I'm still good as the lender, right? I'm really not really all that concerned about the market or the market environment. All that I know is that when you are done with your business model, I'm going to get my money back, or I'm going to get the asset that you've been working on, one or the other, right? So the risks are usually more to the borrower because the borrower almost has more skin in the game than you do, okay? Because the borrowers come in and has put their own money down, they brought a deal, they put a lot of work into it, and you are just sitting back waiting for them to pay you. And if they don't pay you, well, then we're going to go on, what are the risks to the lender? Clark, the lender has a first position lien on the home. That means nobody else can come and take the home. That if they want to sell the house, they've got to pay you back first. If they don't pay you, you can take the house back or the collateral, whatever it might be. Let's just call it a house. And so the lenders are really protected by the asset on which they have loaned. So to make it very simple, somebody brings a $400,000 house to me, it's worth $400,000 today. They want to borrow $200,000. If they don't pay me, I get a $400,000 house, right? And I'll do what's called a deed in lieu of foreclosure. So if you don't pay me, I'm not going to drag you through the foreclosure courts. You're going to agree to simply hand over the property to me, and I won't pursue any additional foreclosure activity against you. And then also, if you don't pay me as the lender, I'm going to have default extra default fees, so that $200,000 loan that I gave you will very quickly add up to every bit of equity that you have in a house. And so the risks are really on the borrower side. The risks are really not all that much on the lender side. And the reason why I say that is in 2008 and 9, during the financial crisis, the average default rate in the hard money lending industry was less than 1%.
Wow, that's incredible.
Think about that. Do you know why? Because people have a lot of skin in the game. If you go out and you put $100,000 down and then you put another $50,000 of renovations into a property, are you going to let $150,000 of your money disappear because you cannot make a $2,000 payment? No. The answer is no. You're not going to do it. On top of the reputation within the industry as well, because most hard money lending is fairly local. And so within the industry of lending, your reputation as a borrower is everything. So if you've heard anybody talking about borrowing or lending in podcasts before, you will always hear the lender gets paid back first. Who gets paid back first? Every single time.
Always
the lender. Who do you never burn? Never, ever, ever. Who don't you burn?
You don't bite the hand that feeds you, David.
Did you ever hear the term, I have to write a check to come to the table? To come to the closing table? The person who's borrowed the money is going to write a check, a personal check, to make sure that you get all of the loan back and that you have your origination and you have your interest payments in full every single time. The default rate is exceptionally low, but I'm not going to say it doesn't never happens, because it can happen really up in the bigger, higher institutional level. So what we're talking about is local, a flipper comes to us, they need money for a deal. We're able to analyze that deal and we're able to create a really great income stream for us, being the lenders, or for somebody who wants to partner with us and bring in some money. Okay. That's a win-win for everybody. But there is a scenario, and usually happens up in the higher echelons of the lending world. You've heard the word big debt funds. So these big bridge capital. So that's just where somebody goes out, they buy a 500 unit building. And it takes, 2 years to come in and fix. That's essentially fix and flip. So a lot of syndications are in trouble right now because they went out, they bought these 500 unit buildings for like 12 million. They were going to spend, let's say, 3 million doing them up, and they were going to, sell them for 22 million to make $7 million for their investors. Well, guess what? They bought it for 12 million. They've spent the 3 million doing it up, but it's now worth 12 million. So they've lost their investors' money. But who have they lost? The lender is still at 12 million in this scenario, right? So the lenders are not getting burned yet. This is the stack, what they call the capital stack. The first money to get lost is the borrower, right? Their deposit, right? Whatever money they brought into the deal, right? The second, now this is in institutional capital. So the first bit of money to get burned is the equity, right? And is a profit. Then the next level is the equity. So whatever money they thought they were going to make is gone. Then whatever money they're, the people who invested in that particular fund, whatever they put in there, that's gone. Who's the last person to lose money? The last person to lose money.
The lender. It's
the lender every single time.
I want to interject something, David, and I think it's something that it's hard. Someone that listening to this is like, okay, cool. I'm game. I like it. I've got 200K. I want to lend, but I want you to understand who you're lending to. And it's like, you hear about the default rate in 2008, 2009, right? That's, Sally, the homeowner that got a loan from Wells Fargo, right? Lose their job, stop being able to pay, but there's no personal connection between Sally, the homeowner, and Wells Fargo. It's just a number on a spreadsheet, right?
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, they're not going to come in and you're not having Thanksgiving dinner with Wells Fargo, right? So there's nothing personal about it. The thing is that, and I'll give you a story, is that when I first started flipping, I was getting private money or hard money from friends and family, right? And I remember I had a flip that all the things went wrong. Construction costs went way higher. We couldn't sell it for as much as we thought. Every mistake that you're going to hear on a fix and flipper, I made it on one single deal, right? So then it rolled over to a 13th month, and that meant it was only a 12-month loan, and I got a penalty. Okay. Now, I'm not dealing with Wells Fargo. I'm dealing with a really good buddy. I could have easily picked up the phone, called him and said, hey man, I lost like $25,000 or $30,000 on this deal, right? I could have picked up the phone and said, hey, is there any way I can not pay you another $4,000 to extend this loan by 6 months and continue to pay interest, right? And I thought, you know what? It's important to not burn relationships. It's not his problem that I had bad contractors, that I didn't, the sales price wasn't what I thought it was going to be, right? So I wrote the check. He didn't know anything about it. It wasn't his problem if I made money or lost money. And that's the beautiful thing about being in lending, right? And the difference is between me, the borrower, versus Sally, homeowner, that has a loan with Wells Fargo, is this was a good buddy. B, I'm building a relationship. So he's investing in me. And guess what happened? He's lent me millions of dollars since that first transaction. If I would have called him over a $3,000 or $4,000, like, hey, woe is me, feel bad for me. Come on, man, I'm already losing 25 grand. Can you not make it 30 grand that I'm losing? And that $4,000 that I lost and wrote a check for and took it, and you know what? He's now lent me millions of dollars. And guess what that has made me over the course of my career? Millions of dollars, right? And guess what? When I call him, he picks up the phone and he says, how quickly can I get you the money? And we have a trust level there. You don't have that with your typical borrower of a Wells Fargo moving into a house. So that's why not only are, as you went into, is that when the lenders are lending on these loans, they're not lending at 90 or 95%, right? This isn't an FHA loan at 97.5% of purchase, right? This is a loan at 70% of purchase or 65% of the value of the property. So you have that layer built in. But I want you to understand who the borrower is. I am the borrower in this instance where it's like, I care about my reputation. I don't want to burn this type of relationship. And I had $4,000, I didn't like it. I didn't like writing that check, but because I was a little bit more experienced, I had the money to be like, I can see the bigger picture. Your typical homeowner that's a first-time home buyer that lost their job and they don't have any savings and they barely got approved for that loan for that first thing. They don't have the money and they don't care, right? They're not eating, Thanksgiving dinner with Wells Fargo. So if you have between the LTV, which is you're only lending at 70%, you have more of that personal relationship with these folks, knowing that they don't want to look you eye to eye to burn you. And then the fact that you have all this underwriting experience to be able to look at it because we played on both sides of the fence, it equals that there's risk for a lender, like there's a risk in any investment. But as you've probably seen, the risk is much, much lower right now than the borrower is taking.
Yeah, I'd rather be the lender than anybody else in any real estate transaction. I'd rather be the lender in any syndication, in any fund, depending on what it is that I'm after. If I'm after capital appreciation, maybe lending's not the thing, right? But if I'm after income, being a lender, there's no greater position in my mind than being the lender in every scenario.
David, let's take one quick caveat is that you don't want to go to, I love, analogies. You don't want to go to Vegas with your rent money, right? So worst case scenario, let's just take the worst case scenario. The borrower is bad, the contractor was bad, whatever went wrong, and they're not making payments. Well, you're going to have to take the asset back, right? And it may be through foreclosure or deed in lieu. So it's going to take longer. So if you were put your $100,000 in and that's all you have, and now you need to pay a medical bill, well, maybe this isn't the right kind of situation for you. So you do need to have a certain amount of capital, and don't put all your capital into one deal, because what if the worst case thing that happens, you're going to get your money back, right? You're going to get an asset that you only loaned 60 or 70 cents on the dollar. So ultimately you may even benefit because there'll be late fees and higher interest charges, but you might not get that back for 18 months, right? So you have to be able to have the resiliency to withstand that 18 months of not having that in your bank account. If you've gone to Vegas with your rent money and you lose your rent money, you're not going to have a roof over your head. So that is something that you really need to keep in mind as to when you're looking at this opportunity, is how much money you're willing to lend versus your total amount of capital you have in your bank.
That's great. I'm gonna clarify that for the listener. So there's really is two types of lending. That was really good, by the way. The two types of lending. You can be a direct lender where me, David, I'm lending you, Clark, $200,000, so that you could go out and buy a $300,000 house and spend $50,000 and fix it up and sell it for $430,000. Okay, I'm directly lending to you, or we could use an intermediary that's doing that, right? But I'm the lender on your deal. Okay, that's what I call, and what you and I call, the arbitrage model, where we're just arbitraging the person beside us. Okay, we're the direct lender. Or we can use so in that scenario, if I'm the lender and you're the borrower and you default, you're defaulting on me, and I have my lawyer who has written up all of our loan agreements and has me super well protected, right? And so he just goes straight in and does his thing, and he immediately just gets the collateral. It's actually not all that hard, quite frankly. So my worst case scenario is really that I get a $430,000 house for my $200,000 loan. And then I just go out and I fire sale that or whatever. It's so rare, but it does happen. Yeah. There's another scenario where I can be the lender, where I can lend into a debt fund, where I put, let's say, my $200,000 and it's spread out among 100 different borrowers. Okay. And then every month I get my 10%. You know, I don't know exactly what particular loan my where my money, what particular loan my money's on, because it's not on one particular loan. It's spread out among maybe 100 loans or 200 loans. So if one loan defaults in a packet of 120 loans, it doesn't really matter for any of the borrowers.
Yeah.
You know, my payment this month, instead of being $1,000 a month, my payment might be $980 this month. So that's the difference. So you can be directly lending to the borrower. They tend to be, 18-month loans, but you tend to make more money. Or you can lend to a debt fund, and in that scenario, they usually have like a minimum of about 6 months. They like you to leave your money in the debt fund for at least a year, but they will encourage you by offering you more money and to leave it in there for 2 years or 3 years. So exactly to your point, lending is a form of deriving an income stream with no hassle whatsoever, by and large. You sign up, you send your money, and that's the end of it. There's very little else involved. But it does require that you have your money in these deals, usually for 12 months to 18 months. I think that's a good round way of thinking about it. And so when I put money out in loans, and I have lots of them, I'm okay with that. I don't want my money back because I don't plan on doing anything with it. But, I don't take my right now emergency fund and put it in there. So I would always recommend that somebody has $30,000, $40,000 just sitting in their real estate account or sitting in your personal account or doing whatever, that you have like your rainy day money. Don't take your rainy day money and put it into lending.
Yeah.
Okay. Take your big chunks of cash. Let's say you got a retirement lump sum, or you sold your business, or you got something happened with regards to any kind of windfall. In that scenario, diversify that, put some of it into long-term growth, put some of it into tax efficient models. And then if you like, well, that's great, all the growth stuff is taken care of, but I need to eat hamburgers today or kale, whichever is the case. Lending is an amazing way to create an income so that you can take, if you look out my window right now, it's lending that's paying for this right this minute. Okay. There are people working their butts off, fixing houses, fixing quadplexes, building businesses, building a new dentist place right now with my money. And I'm sitting here and I'm going to stay here for the summer, and lending is paying for it. And that is basically what hard money lending is. It is absolutely liberating. And it's we all talk about what the only regrets we have. This is something that you grow to. You don't regret not being a lender. You learn how to be a lender. And once you learn how to be a lender, you feel this sense of empowerment for the remainder of your life. You're like, I can always create income, and I don't have to go and work every day because that capital goes out and it works its butt off. Maybe one of the downsides of being a lender is it creates income, and income creates income tax. So I would strongly recommend that you have real estate to offset that income tax that you're going to be paying on your lending income. It's all a circle, a virtuous real estate circle, Clark. And with that, let's conclude. So our idea today was to go out and maybe educate our listeners as to the different stages of and the different opportunities within real estate. I think lending is the top tier. Once you've made money in your life and all you want to do is create an income stream for yourself, to me, lending is hands down, without a doubt, the easiest way to make money in real estate.
And I hear this and I love this topic because you're leveraging something other than your time. And I think that the big premise of our podcast when you're listening is a lot of these episodes are focused on creating passive income through, buying passive properties, whether it's residential or commercial or whatever that is, but you're leveraging something other than your time. And this is no different. You're leveraging your capital, and it's not for everybody.
No.
Because there's still, at the end of the day, like you always, you want to have a few legs on your stool, right? So it's like, we still believe, and we practice this, is that even in this time of turmoil in the market, we're still buying and holding rental properties and stabilizing and building and keeping, right? But at the same time, those aren't making any cash flow right now. So it's like, you got to be able to lean on something else, and you got to be able to eat hamburgers, as you gave the analogy. And you know what? I don't like eating ramen noodles every night, right? I at least like a nice burger. And this is a way to be able to do that in a low risk environment. But please don't take away from this that you should only do that. If you're 40 years old right now, you need to be buying and investing in real estate, because you can buy in any market. And whether you're high or low and you dollar cost average your portfolio, you are slowly building your wealth. So don't forget that we're not saying that this is the end all be all, right? And everyone that's listening is in a little different spot financially, in their age, in their journey to wealth creation. But it's tough right now. It's harder than it was 12 months ago to be able to find something that actually pencils it out and makes sense. So at the end of the day, why not get off the beach? Okay. Stop complaining to everyone that, oh, real estate's too hard. There are ways. And we just spent this last amount of time telling you a very fairly low risk, low brain damagey way to be able to make, $800 or $900 a month on your $100,000 investment. And we've gone through all the ways that we've been able to de-risk that investment,
Right.
so that it's the borrower that is kind of digging for gold, and you're just out there selling the shovel, and you're kind of getting paid whether they make $60,000 on the deal or they lose $5,000. More than likely, it's going to be a better investment. So with that, David, send us out from France, my friend. You give us some wisdom from France.
Okay, here's my wisdom from France. It's my experience talking to hundreds of investors that most people have a monthly, not everybody, depends on who you are, but most families, mom, dad, 2 kids, right, have a monthly expense of around $13,000 to $15,000. Yours might be a little bit higher, yours might be a little bit lower, somewhere around there. Let's say it's $15,000. That's $1.5 million. Can produce $15,000 a month in income, right? So I just want to put that in context. $1.5 million can absolutely liberate you. It's that simple, right? So that $15,000 a month can be derived from lending $1.5 million in a hard money lending environment and leave you job optional. Okay. Now there's 1,000 other ways to take that money and do other things with it. But in its simplest form, if you're going out to work every day and you're barely getting by and your life costs, $15,000 a month, right? $1.5 million is working as hard as you are. Okay. And it goes up from there or down from there. It all depends. But what I'm saying is, when people say there's no cash flow in real estate right now, you're not the lender or become the lender. Because there's plenty of cash flow in real estate. There's just no cash flow on buying a new asset and holding it at high interest rates. Become the lender, and it's cash flow coming out your eyeballs. And I'll leave it right there, from France or from anywhere else.
Thanks, guys. See you on the next one.
You've been listening to the Burn Your Boats podcast with Clark Lunt and David Shaw. We would love to hear from you. Please reach out at burnyourboatswealth.com with comments, questions, and if you have a topic you would like Clark and David to discuss on an upcoming episode. We would very much appreciate it if you took the time to rate and review Burn Your Boats podcast on your favorite podcast listening app, and make sure to follow and share on social media. Content in Burn Your Boats podcast is for entertainment purposes only and is not legal or financial advice. Please review our legal disclaimer at Burn Your Boats Wealth. landlord.com. Thank you for listening.